Welcome back to the Carolina Packers podcast. Our last video we kind of just did was the continued guarantees from this past week's, where we pretty much were perfect, other than the Vikings game. This video, of course, will go through that and kind of what happened and see what is next for some of these teams, I guess you can say. I guess we can start off by looking at the Vikings-Giants game, which was the one we got wrong. Of all the picks, we were pretty strong about. I think this was one of the ones that I didn't expect to be wrong about. I think obviously the Bills and Bengals game I feel like I was more confident with, but this game was one of those ones that, again, we had mentioned that, okay, if the Vikings team, whatever Vikings team shows up is going to be the result. We kind of alluded to that, but again, you look at this with how the Vikings played.
That wasn't really what happened.
Yeah. It was
something that we didn't expect would happen, which was
no one expected what happened.
Daniel Jones, to his credit, played the game of his life.
100%.
The Giants should be feeling really good about his development right now. I mean, he had, 300 plus passing yards, 70 rushing yards. The Vikings, and I believe the Packers beat the Vikings pretty badly, right?
Yes,
and
2 weeks ago.
And they ran all over them.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you have to.
And so
you look at these two, at this team, and say, okay, Vikings going into it saying, we're going to hold Saquon Barkley to 9 rushing attempts, 50 yards. Yes, he had 2 touchdowns. You don't say that. We had 9 rushing attempts for 50 yards. You're going into that as a Vikings fan and say, dang, yeah, it's a little around 6 yards a carry, but holding him to 9 yards, it must have been a shootout, and that's what we want. We want a shootout between Daniel Jones and Kirk Cousins.
Right.
With the weapons that the Vikings have versus the weapons that
the
Giants have. And the fact that everybody kind of looks at Daniel Jones still about, the meme, especially, with the whole...
As the guy running in the open field.
Yeah, falling. Yeah. You kind of look at him as that and kind of look at Kirk Cousins as kind of, has started to establish himself, kind of. Yes, he's had those games where kind of been iffy. But, again, didn't have a bad game this game. Only 8 incompletions on 39 pass attempts.
Right.
2 touchdowns. 273 isn't a lot of yards, but decent amount of yards. You look at that game and say, oh yeah, Vikings in a shootout will win this game.
Right.
And even if we were told beforehand and all that would have happened, the game is in Daniel Jones's hands. I think anybody, most people, I should say, would look at that and say, Vikings have won this game.
Vikings win, yeah.
Yeah. But again, we were wrong.
Yes.
He
played an excellent game. He ran for
78 yards.
78 yards
on 17 attempts. He almost doubled the amount of attempts as Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
Again, there were scrambles in there.
Yep.
And I think that's what cost the Vikings. The Vikings defense was so bad. Obviously, they fired their defensive coordinator. But the fact of you can't allow on 3rd downs a quarterback to get outside the pocket and get a first down as many times as it happened to them in this game.
Right.
You look at that and say, okay, the Vikings either could not cover anybody or could not account for the mobility of Daniel Jones. You look at both situations, it just was a recipe for disaster for that defense.
Right.
I mean, you look at how that defense played in mix with how the offense played. Offense for the Vikings played well. 24 points is a decent game. It's a decent game for the Vikings. They had, I want to make sure. They had 0 turnovers, and had a great game. Had very few penalties, 3 penalties of 12 yards versus the Giants 5 for 45. Yeah, Giants had 3 sacks allowed. Vikings had 0 sacks allowed. You look at this and say, oh, wow, that's what it is. 7 for 13, over 50% on 3rd down efficiency for the Giants, whereas the Vikings were 4 for 10.
Right. And that's, in some ways, the game right there, right?
And that's the game right there. Yeah, exactly. That's what we had alluded to it earlier. But the Vikings' decision making on third down, for a couple of them, were so poor. Obviously, the glaring one was the very end of the game with the whole Kirk Cousins on third down or fourth down, that might have been, dumping it off a 3-yard pass on 4th and 8 or whatever, and thinking Hawkinson with the guy right on him was going to be able to break a tackle. Which again, Hawkinson, amazing game, very very talented tight end, and maybe he does break that tackle a couple times or whatever. But in that kind of situation, you need to go down the field, extend that drive. And so, as a Viking fan would probably tell you, it wasn't a bad game. Like it, other than the defense, the offense played well. Again, bad decision making on that third down. That third down one might have set the mood, might have set the tone early in the game, where the Vikings did the reverse pass from Justin Jefferson. Again, great pass. It completed, but you're passing it to Kirk Cousins on 3rd and 1.
Yeah.
In what way do you not just run it with Dalvin Cook up the middle? Or again, they kind of were struggling up the middle, so maybe a little stretch.
Pass it to Justin Jefferson.
Or pass it to Justin Jefferson.
Or Hawkinson.
Yeah. I mean, if you didn't want to run it right up the middle, there's so many other play calls before you get to the reverse pass to the quarterback.
Yeah, so early in the game. It's
So
such
early
a
in the game.
non-desperate position.
And I think you look at that, and I remember watching it. The rest of my family are Vikings fans, and I just sat there and was like, "What are you doing?
Right.
What in the world?" As a Viking fans, I know they're pissed about that play call. I know I will say, I know the bigger light being shined is on the defense and on that last play that the Vikings offense had, where it was 4th down and he dumped it down. But I think it goes way further back into that initial play call where you have to establish that you're going to be completely dominating this whole entire game instead of kind of like, oh, we're just going to mess around. And then all of a sudden, the Giants obviously were no joke against this defense and really showed that they were a strong team that day.
Right.
And so I think, yes, the blame can be put on probably the defense, a lot of it, but the execution on certain plays that certainly get needed are very important. Like, I mean, as you look in football, there's certain times in the games and certain downs and certain plays that are so much more important than others.
Right.
You need to have your best play call for all of them.
Yeah, you set a tone.
Exactly. And it's like you need to establish it, set the tone early on, so then the rest of the game you feel comfortable. And if you don't do that, the defense again struggled so badly against this Giants team that again on paper you're like, this is an easy win. Right. The Vikings, 24 points isn't a lot of points, but that should be enough against this Giants offense.
Right.
You would think. On most days, that should be enough. And I think that the Vikings have to be upset about their future, too. I mean, you're hiring a whole new defensive coordinator. The defense has to step up. Obviously, offense is solid. But
what do you do to change things for next year? You're almost in a run-it-back scenario.
Yeah, and again, the Vikings, 13-5. Every single team would take 13-5.
Yeah.
Every team. And so you look at that and say, again, with those one-score games, it came back and finally bit them in the butt with the 31-24. This is their first one-score loss this entire year. They are now 11-1 on the year. In one-score games, which again,
and all streaks come to an end.
Like we had mentioned in the past video with the 49ers. And that's why it's insane to look at this game and think, okay, the Vikings team did not show up, and the Giants team very much showed up and played probably again, maybe the defense didn't play as well as they could have, but the offense played the best game of the year.
Yes, of the last years.
Yeah,
I would say.
That's true.
For the consequential nature of it, this was their best game.
Yeah, exactly.
The other games,
I think
a handful of them were pretty straightforward, like the Seahawks, 49ers.
Brock Purdy looked good.
He looked good. It was close, and then the 49ers broke out in the second half, and it was obviously not close at all by the end of it.
Yeah, I think looking at this stat line, 30 passes is about where you want to have Brock Purdy at.
Yep.
25 to 30 passes. I think that's exactly where you want him. You have such a good running attack. You have such good, defense and everything. You want it around 25 to 30 every game and kind of just having him do what he did. Like, I mean, obviously 18 of 30, a little over 50%.
The big
three
thing,
touchdowns,
three
332
touchdowns,
yards.
That's a big number right there.
Like that's the perfect game for him.
Yep.
And of course, as you can see, Seahawks had the lead going into half, and then second half obviously was all San Francisco.
Brock Purdy, they're in a situation where their team is so strong and so well built, and he's the last player of last year's draft, Mr. Irrelevant, third string quarterback. They're in a scenario where they expect, and probably will be very good next year.
Oh yeah.
They just need him to limit turnovers, right? So if he goes in and he doesn't perform a lot of sloppy turnovers or things like that, keeps the ball pretty safe, and is able to utilize the passing weapons they have with George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey can catch.
Yeah, everybody.
What's his name? Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
They have so many weapons.
They have a
if
lot
he
of
can
weapons.
take advantage of that enough that the defense has to respect those passing players and not just blitz the quarterback and lock down the box all the time, then they open up the running game. Obviously, for years they've had sort of a running back by committee, but now they have Christian McCaffrey, kind of a all
I mean, yeah,
generation all-star talent. So if he can just limit turnovers, which he did obviously last game, just keep it kind of a safe ball, and then take advantage of openings enough to open up the defense and keep them guessing, I think they're looking pretty good. And that's what they did here.
Yeah, he also had a rushing touchdown. I forgot about that. He had 4 total touchdowns.
That's a great game for Brock Purdy.
It's an amazing game.
So we'll see how that plays in. We'll talk about that in another video. We talked about
that last. Yeah.
Um,
I think the other game we can start off with, or say again, is the Cowboys Buccaneers. Tom Brady looks old.
Yep.
He didn't look that good. Obviously 2 touchdowns. He had 66 pass attempts.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's difficult about this year with Tom Brady is he has a lot of yardage, a lot of touchdowns, but you don't see many quarterbacks passing the number of times that he is passing.
Like just put that in perspective. Brock Purdy had 30 attempts, so less than half the attempts that Tom Brady had.
330 yards.
And 330 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
what does Dak Prescott have in this game?
33 attempts. Had literally half the attempts. 305, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
Right.
So he had an amazing game. He had 5 total touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown too. So I mean, you look at it. Tom Brady was 2 pass attempts away from breaking or tying the record for most pass attempts in a playoff game.
And I feel like he's come close to the 60 attempts mark multiple times
this year. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, you had 12 rush attempts by the whole entire team in the game. And again, like, White was 7 for 41 for 5.9 yards a carry.
Right.
You want that. Like, obviously, Fournette had a terrible game. Fournette, I know, is really upset about that. Had 1 catch, 6 yards, 11 yards carry. But yeah, I think Cowboys really flexed their muscle against a team that we all knew was not going to do well. Or at least I did. I think this was one of the easier ones we had called.
Yep.
Again, yes, Tom Brady is Tom Brady, but they were 8-9 this year in a very bad division.
Yep.
He just didn't look himself, and
it's hard to see him ever having another great playoff run. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult.
It's hard, and I've said that for 10 years now, probably.
But now, I don't know. I've thought that for a couple of years. I was surprised at how well he did his first, let's even say 2 years at the Buccaneers. Yeah. But obviously this year
kind of looks like
we've all been waiting for the decline. There's always the storyline of, they were down 1 year and come back, but he's 46.
He'll be 46.
At some
this year.
point, time does matter.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can only stave off Father Time for so long, so we'll see.
And then now kind of the closer games, I think the Bills and Bengals, the Bengals should not have won that game.
No, that was surprising.
That was one of the, like I said, the biggest surprises was that game, because you look at it and watch it. Ravens played really well. Bengals didn't play well.
Yep.
Like, again.
It was the Ravens' game to lose, and they lost it on a leaping 1 yard line fumble for the touchdown that was then miraculously returned all the way for a defensive touchdown, and they could not recover from that point swing.
Yeah. And I mean, Huntley played well.
Yep.
I mean, he had the fumble, he had the interception, but
he didn't play well after that play.
Yeah, after that play, he kind of ruined it. But he had 54 rushing yards, 226 passing, only 29 attempts, but had 2 touchdowns passing. Like, he played well. Yep. Like, he did.
Could have had a rushing touchdown, but fumbled it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's one of those things where, again, Bengals probably lose that game more times than not in most scenarios. That simple mistake right there cost them the game. They would have gone up 7 points. Again, we don't know what would have happened after that, but nothing that the Bengals were doing gave me hope in that, they're going to score a touchdown and then they're going to score again in order to win the game. Again, Bengals end up getting that touchdown, don't score after that. No one scores after that. They kind of hold on to the lead. The Dolphins-Bills. This game is interesting because I think it seemed like neither team wanted to win. Yeah. Obviously, Skylar Thompson, again, backup quarterback.
Third string, right?
Third string, yes, because Teddy Bridgewater.
Yep.
Third string quarterback, 18 for 45.
Yep.
220, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions.
Terrible game.
Yep. But they only lost by 3.
Yes.
Because, again, yes, Josh Allen, 23 of 39, 352, 3 touchdowns. He had 2 interceptions.
Yep.
Like, it's not what you want. Like, he had some pretty crucial interceptions in that game. Just did not look good sometimes.
And I think part of it is the Dolphins, all the parts that made that team such a contender early on came up in the biggest way they could. Obviously, the quarterback play was 100%
the reason they lost. And it's sad because I think both the Ravens and the Dolphins probably feel like we have our starting quarterback in, we win the game.
Yep.
I feel like that's
and the Dolphins are sitting there thinking we have our second string quarterback in, we win that game. Teddy Bridgewater, I think, wins that game.
Probably, and that is so frustrating. I would assume for the fans out there, I would be very frustrating to see.
It's got to be frustrating too for Thompson, right? Because he's been riding the bench the entire season, not expecting that he would have to come in and play, and he's essentially called, like Teddy Bridgewater. When was he injured?
I think he was injured during the game. I think he broke his finger or something down on his throwing hand.
But which game? Not this.
It was. Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
2-3 weeks ago.
Probably.
Right. So, and is Skylar Thompson a rookie?
I think so.
So that would be, I think, tough. Coming in as a rookie behind Tua and Teddy Bridgewater, right? And then having your first real big game in the playoffs, or one of your first real big games.
I think he's a rookie.
Just look up his stats.
Yeah, he's rookie.
But go to his ESPN stats or whatever. I want to see how he did in other games.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean it's one of those things where
because he played very poorly. And that's one of those things that you hope he can move on from and develop from. I'm sure that he feels pretty badly about that.
I mean, yeah, he had let me share the screen real quick.
Okay, so this was
up there. Obviously these 3 games don't really count. It's probably coming in back up, but the past 2 games he has not looked terrible.
Well,
he hasn't looked amazing.
those are all short passes.
These are
though.
very short passes.
Like that-
12 completions for 100 yards.
He's just doing dump offs and they run.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, he is.
But
not,
I mean, like this game, 20 of 31, 152 yards. These averages are so small.
yeah. So I guess this was what game 3 for him.
Mm-hmm. He played against the Jets earlier in the year, lost. He played against the Vikings, it looked like, for a little bit, probably an injury to Tua.
Yeah.
Played a little bit here and there. Played against the Patriots, lost. The only win he had was against the Jets, week 18.
11-6.
11-6.
Yeah. So very poor quarterback play.
But again, it like
amazing
I said,
how close the game was.
yeah. You look at this, and we pretty much those two games were the guarantees of the weekend. I'd say is
Yep.
because they had backup quarterbacks in against two teams that you think are Super Bowl contenders easily.
Yeah, it was backup quarterbacks. Well, yeah, third string.
Third
on
string
the
on the Dolphins,
second
string
on the
again.
Ravens. The
Ravens
Ravens
quarterback was coming back from an injury too. Like the backup was coming back from his shoulder.
And the
injury.
Ravens haven't looked like a contender at all this year.
No, they've looked kind of a little not the best.
They don't have the receiving core.
Yeah, they don't have the
Right.
receiving core, and it's frustrating because I know Lamar Jackson is so good.
Yep.
He is so good. He's obviously injured and everything, but you have Lamar there, you have Tua there.
Mhm.
These games would probably been a little different.
Yep.
And then we have one more game to talk about, and that is the Jaguars and the Chargers. Obviously, this was the call of the week for us. I think, obviously, watching the game was a little nerve-wracking for us. It was the first game of the weekend, and we were like, oh, or at least I was like, oh, we lost, we're 0-1 already. And turns out, with 4 interceptions,
Going into the
0
second half.
touchdowns, had the touchdown at the very end of the first half. But even then, 1 touchdown to 4 interceptions in the first half.
And for a while, he was like 4 or 5 completions.
Mm-hmm.
It just, played terribly.
Trevor Lawrence just, again, it was 27-7 at halftime.
Yep.
And I remember watching and saying, okay, the Jaguars have the firepower.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they have a really good offense. Their defense is a little bit, hit or miss. And the defense definitely showed up in the second half, only allowing 3 points the entire second half, which is amazing. So, again, Chargers missed a field goal too. So it was one of those things where it was like very, very interesting to watch. And again, Jaguars, you take out that first half. I wish I'd known on top of like in front of me or whatever what Trevor Lawrence stats were.
Mm-hmm.
After with that one drive, that touchdown drive at the end of the first half to the end of the game, because it was probably around like 24 of 37 or 34 or something like that.
And it showed some pretty impressive mental fortitude.
Oh yeah,
I would say to come out of that halftime and carry the team back.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna be very interesting to see them against the Chiefs. I think they have the team. I think the Chiefs defense is a little lackluster than everybody knows. So if it's a shootout, I think you obviously pick the Chiefs. But I don't think this Jaguars team needs to be slept on anymore. I think they won the division with a huge comeback at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
They came over and they were really down early in the year. They came back. They beat the Titans in order to get that that division, and then they come to the playoffs hot and beat the Chargers. Which again, you look at this. Herbert did not have a bad day. Eckler, you look at it, 35 rushing yards for Eckler on 7 attempts.
Yeah.
Joshua Kelly had 7 attempts for 20 yards. They really, the Jaguars' run defense really showed what they had.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Herbert did well.
Yep.
25 of 43, 273, 1 touchdown only. Again, Austin Eckler had 2.
He did okay.
He did okay. And I think the Jaguars, I remember picking the Jaguars and saying, they're a solid team.
Yep.
And I remember watching the end of the season and seeing how the Jaguars performed. I knew they would be good, but the fortitude, like you were mentioning, to overcome that deficit and the Trevor Lawrence throwing so many interceptions, just having a terrible game
Yep.
in the first half, and just completely turning it around and just showing why he was the number one recruit.
Yes.
Like he was the number one pick, number one recruit in high school. He just was so good. He's been so
Yes.
good for so long, obviously. On the Jaguars, especially last year, you kind of forget about them because they just didn't perform well.
And it's interesting to see because it's been rare, though I guess maybe Joe Burrow could be viewed as an exception. He didn't walk into the same situation.
Yeah.
But we've had a bunch of teams in recent years try to just draft the best quarterback they can on a bad team and turn it around, and they end up just wasting that quarterback. It gets in their head. They're not successful.
So many quarterbacks.
So many quarterbacks do that. The Jaguars, they didn't do well as far as wins. Lawrence's first season, but he played well.
He played well, and I think that was overlooked.
And has continued to play well. And I think now that they have a great quarterback, great in college, one of perhaps the great college quarterbacks.
Maybe Tim Tebow, him, Vince Young, maybe up, but at least one of those top 10, you'd have to say,
right,
quarterbacks in college,
has made the transition. It looks like to the NFL and is playing great here. People want to play with him. The Jaguars are going into the draft in the offseason saying, well, we just got to get some defensive people. Get
that's
the
it.
Secondary. You know?
And I mean
they've got
what
the run game. They've got the pass game. Their offense is excellent. So they can focus on one problem. They're looking great. I think despite the loss, it was a close game. The Chargers have been wishy-washy all season, which is why I had leaned towards the Jaguars as being kind of the spoiler in this. But they, I believe, fired their offensive coordinator.
You had mentioned
They've got the talent. I think the Chargers also, if they fix whatever their wishy-washiness is, as far as I think it must be mostly coaching. They could also probably do some stuff with the defensive end. They could also have a very bright future.
Yeah,
so both these teams should be feeling good
exactly.
going into
I think the
year.
AFC next year is going to be insane.
Yeah.
I think the NFC, again, is going to be a little, depending on what happens with a lot of these teams, but most likely it's going to be a little lackluster. But you're talking about these two teams, you're talking about the Bills, Bengals, you're talking about so many teams, Chiefs, that are most likely going to be dominant next year, and all in the same conference. It's going to be very entertaining to watch. And again, the Jaguars have a big game against the Chiefs this weekend. I just feel like the Jaguars are going to get slept on.
Yeah,
and I feel like they're going to have a really strong performance against the Chiefs, and that experience is so important for young teams.
Yeah,
that the Jaguars are. Yeah. Yes, they might not win this weekend, or today, I should say. They might not win, but they're going to gain so much experience by winning a comeback win against a very good Chargers team, and then going into Arrowhead and getting that experience of, okay, let's see how far we can go. We're playing with, the church's money, as they say. We're doing well.
Yep. And chances are against them on winning this game. Yeah. If they win, well, then I think you have to look at them and say they've got the momentum to be like a Bengals again. Yeah. Last year, who's going to stop them if the Chiefs couldn't? If the likely scenario happens and they lose, they still hopefully can come away from their first brush with one of the elite teams of the last handful of years at home,
and if they can play them tight, that'd be awesome.
So this is a big moment for them. This is a big opportunity for them, no matter what.
And I think another thing is Doug Peterson is the coach for the Jaguars. Has that Super Bowl experience with the Eagles. Yep. When they won. Yep. And so I feel like that is a big part of it, where they have the experience from their head coach. He can kind of lead them and everything. Obviously, Etienne, obviously Lawrence, have been a part of big games.
They also have who else is one of the? They have another running back who is injured, right?
Ooh.
Why am I blanking on his name?
I don't know off the top of my head.
He's been good.
James Robinson's left them.
That's what I'm thinking of. They
Yeah,
traded
they left.
Him.
Yeah, they
traded
him,
him to
yeah.
the Jets, right?
Mm.
And what did they get for that trade?
I don't know off the top of my head. Let me
Maybe
look.
picks.
Probably.
Because they are in a spot where they want to try to sign some free agents and maybe get a top pick trade for some top picks in the draft. Because they don't want to draft a bunch of, building projects necessarily. They're a year or two out from really being there.
Oh, so they traded James Robinson for a 6th round pick that could become a 5th round pick, depending on what happens. I guess playing time maybe because he had the injury last season or whatever. Or I guess no, Brees Hall had the injury. But yeah, depending on how he plays, I guess it depends on when the draft pick is going to be. But again, Jaguars, big win, huge win.
Yep.
Chargers, nothing to, again, yes, you lose a big comeback game. You hope that next year won't be like oh my gosh, we just lost a big, spiral. You hope not, but I think they'll be a very good team for years to come, just like the Jaguars.
Yep.
Any other comments?
I think that's it.
All right, we'll